Welcome to another edition of Around with Randall, your weekly podcast on making your nonprofit more effective for your community. And here is your host, the CEO and founder of Hallett Philanthropy, Randall Hallett.
It's an honor to have you spend your next 20 minutes or so with me, Randall, on this edition of Around with Randall. As we come into the second half of our calendar year, we'll talk about this here in a second in terms of calendar and fiscal. We get into what I think of as the opportunity for our 6-month uplift. If you are either calendar year or fiscal year, depending if you, in terms of where you set your year ends at June 30th or December 31st, there's a few others that go in a little bit other directions when it comes to their end of the fiscal year. Most of the giving, particularly for those at the largest end, seems to happen in the last quarter of the calendar year. So we are 6 months away from the end of 2024. So you could be planning for next year, or you could trying to get to the end of your fiscal year, which happens to be the same as your calendar year. It doesn't make a difference. Now is the time to begin to really focus in on what you need to be doing. That's what we want to talk about today. This uplift. How do we take what we know, look at what we're doing, and then add to it the ability for us to be successful in the next 6 months so that we have a terrific Thanksgiving, that we have a great holidays. My experience is that when we do the work in end of June and July to really dig into who, we'll talk about these as the tactics, who are the people that we need to be building more passionate, deep relationships with? Who are the people we need to be prioritizing? How do we affect our goals? Where are we at in this goal process? And lastly, what do we do on the personal side in the last 6 months? That's what makes a great Thanksgiving and Christmas or Hanukkah or Kwanzaa or whatever. The last 6 weeks of the year. That's what we want to attack today. So I'm going to break this into two pieces. The theoretical or the methodology is, hey, don't wait till the last minute. Okay, we've covered that. So a lot of tactical today, but I think applicable if you take a note or two or take note or two to be able to best be able to get through the next 6 months. I'm going to tackle the professional first. So if you follow what I talk about constantly when it comes to trying to plan your year, trying to effectuate a positive series of metrics and outcomes that we all hope for, particularly as gift officers, you could position this if you're in the data management side, the infrastructure side, as what am I doing to help those who are trying to get to their goals? Is that I believe in the kind of a two-step process, which you can go back and listen to in the podcast under metrics. Probably 125 or 30, maybe even 40 episodes ago, the relationship building process around starting with a gift chart, just like we do for campaigns, getting names in there so we know who are our priorities. And then the second part is, how does that affect your metrics? At this point, even if you are in July, you should be building relationships, even if you're starting your calendar year or your fiscal year ending June 30, beginning July 1st, is you should be in the process of developing relationships. If you want to look at your year end as a really strong positive, you need to ask the question, who are my top 3 to maybe 6, 7, 8 prospects that are going to make the biggest difference? The data is clear. From the last episode we talked about, when we reviewed the Giving USA numbers, to any number of episodes that I have talked about the same concept, to what I write about, is we have fewer people making a bigger difference. We live in a 95-5 world. 5% of our people making up 95% of our gifts. That's in largesse in an organization. That is largesse in terms of the industry. And for your portfolios, your metrics, it's true there too. So the first step is to realize who are your top 3 to 8, maybe, prospects that you can prioritize for the next 6 months. And you want more than you think, because we're going to have people saying no. We have some uncertain economic, certainly with the election coming up. I'm not anticipating a massive economic demise, But I think there's going to be some consternation in the next 6 months to a year as we look at spending, particularly in the country. So if you're not prioritizing, if you need 3 great gifts, 3-to-1 ratio 9, if you need 2, that's 6. Who are your top prospects? And if you're just counting on 1 or 2, you're not widen the pipeline. Figure out how to build more of those opportunities. So the first is, who are your top 3 to 8, let's say. The second piece of that, or part of that, is, what are the plans? I get frustrated, to be candid, when I'm working with gift officers and I say, great, you've identified Randall as a key prospect that you want to figure out how to build a better relationship with. I think that's great. What's your plan? And they look at me and go, what do you mean? Well, what are they interested in? What is their passion? So if you go back a few episodes, you can listen to the one about cultivation and maybe a little bit of the qualification on the great questions of relationship building, what we should be asking. And you'll hear me say that passion needs to be the most important piece. What are they passionate about? Because if we can figure that out, we then can build steps. So the first question is, what's their passion? Number 2, what are the steps to figure out where that connection lies with their passion and what we do? How do we be creative? The plan should be detailed. When are you planning to see them? Goals. It's not meant to be put in concrete. But if you're not able to say, I need to meet with them here, here, and here to get to an ask, we'll talk about that in a moment, when that should happen, then you are guessing. And we don't want to guess in this process. So a detailed plan. I need to, if I want to ask them at this date to go backwards, I need to make sure I soft ask them at this date. And then I need to figure out exactly the key cultivation. Remember, cultivation, I break it apart into 2. There's the general and the specific. How do I get back to the specific so I know exactly what I'm asking them for that meets with their expectations? The other part of this is when to ask. And too often we get into mid-November and I start asking questions like, okay, you're trying to think about closing either your fiscal year out or the calendar year, even though your fiscal year may be longer. Most of the time our gifts are, a lot of bigger gifts are made at the end of the calendar year. And they say it's November 25th or 7th or just maybe after Thanksgiving. And they say, yeah, I need to go ask them. I'm like, whoa. You haven't asked them? You haven't soft asked them? As I've changed my philanthropy, and it's not anywhere close to large, but just in terms of process because of the company and the way in which my wife and I choose to make our gifts, that if you haven't asked us by about November 1st, I'm beginning that mental process with my wife to figure out what it is we want to do. And so if you come in on December 1st, I'm kind of like, a lot of decisions have already been made. Just to give you a little bit of insight, and a lot of other people do this, I'm actually asking my accountant sometime around October 15th, where's our break even about how much we should give versus how much we pay in taxes? And that has more of a corporate issue than a personal issue because of the larger standard deductions. But it's process. I'm estimating the last 75 days of the year in terms of revenue. Here's where we're at. What should we do? Those things are done to protect myself, to protect my family, but they incorporate philanthropy. So you need to be thinking about asking for that gift somewhere between October 1st and November 10th, which means you need to go backwards, which is why we're doing the 6-month uplift now. Because if you plan this correctly, you may have 2 or 3 moves between now and then to put that soft ask or that gift proposal in front of them October 20th, 24th, November 1st, rather than December 1st. I know it may not seem like much, but those 30 days, those 40 days can be the difference between a gift at the level you think it should be versus a gift level that's okay with the donor because they've made our prospect, because they've made other decisions. So this detailed planning effect is real. It is critically important you are planning what the stages are, the dates are, and the goals are. And at the end, don't forget, it's most important to ask the donor, the prospect, when is the best time to ask you? When is the best time? When do you make these decisions? When would it be most opportune to get you something so you can consider this? So number one, that gift process or that gift chart, metrics, things of that nature in terms of how do you build out those detailed plans. Now we're building into detailed. Use it in the CRM, put it on paper. I prefer the CRM, but if you need paper, that's fine. What are my plans, my dates, my goals for those 3 to 8? That's number one. Number two, when it comes to professional uplift, a 6-month review, getting ready for that last 6 months, is there are probably other goals that you're trying to meet, other metrics, meetings, number of asks. First of all, where are you at? And then secondly, if it's not part of the 3 to 8, so you're kind of do that one first, and then you're going to do the second, is I break it out and divide it by 5. And there's a reason not 6. Because December can and work, but oftentimes people, particularly the last 2 weeks, don't have as much access. It's holidays. So, and it's when this drops, right at the beginning of July, you got vacation. It's really a 5-month window that we have for really a lot of action or engagement with philanthropy conversations with our prospects and donors. And so at the end of the day, we need to break that metrics, whatever's left, and maybe it's for your fiscal year overlaps with the calendar year, so it goes into December 31. How many of these meetings do you need that may have been placed on there as a leading indicator that indicates the work that you're doing? Number one. Number two is the opportunity, the option of breaking this down, then divided by 5. So it gives you a realistic number. Is it possible that we can do what we need to do? How do I make that possible? How do I make sure I'm not waiting to try to do as many of these things in October, November, and December, rather than look at August and September as really unbelievable? Kids are back at school, people's lives settle down, that I'm using that time frame to get in front of people. So whether it's meetings, the number of asks, so if you're an annual giving officer, this all still applies. Your top 3 to 8, you got a goal of 150,000. I got those 3 to 8, and then I got a lot of asks at 1,500, 2,000. If you're a special events person, this also fits because you have events back in the fall. Maybe you want to use your target date instead of December 31. You use it for the event on November 14th, Flag Day. That you are looking at the opportunity of really lining up a series of moves that's appropriate. So find your back end deadline. A lot of times December 31, but maybe special events, a little bit different. What are my meetings, my asks, my other goals? And how do I divide that by 5 to figure out what's appropriate each month? So I have a plan. The third, so the first was your top 3 to 8. Your number 2 is the rest of your metrics, the rest of your goals. How do I break that up into maybe 5 bite-sized chewable parts? And then the last piece is in the professional is habits. What are you doing every day? What are you doing when it comes to showing up on time, having a fire in the belly, isolating yourself to make phone calls, setting meetings, creating habits? We tend too often to think of New Year's as a chance for resolution. I think it's great, but why not use July as a reset as well for self-improvement? So my counsel is to think about this in a little bit different fashion. Use July right now. What habits are you setting for yourself? Are you dialed in? Are you setting time each day on your calendar or 3 times a week to make some phone calls to get appointments? Are you robustly pushing into that pipeline for opportunities, not for this 6 months, for the next 6 months and the year after, with board members and faculty and clinicians, wherever you get your referral points, elevations? Are you spending time with your database team or looking at the data saying, this person made a $1,500 first-time gift, I probably should reach out and find out why they gave to us? Habits, calendar, creating an environment where every day there's tangible proof of the great work that you do to develop these relationships. So that's the professional. Look at your top 3 to 8. Look at the rest of your goals, break them apart, divided by 5 kind of for a December 31 ending point, either that first 6 months coming off the fiscal year or it's the end of your fiscal year. And finally, it's habits. What are you doing every day to make sure you're productive and efficient? And I always talk about that fire in the belly. I'm making phone calls. I'm going to see people. I want to spend just a minute on the personal as well. That what happens in our personal life affects what happens in our professional life. And so it's also a good opportunity to look at, to think about the personal side of our life and how and what we're doing, just as maybe it's an affirmation. Maybe it's a series of improvements. Maybe it's a reset. There's a lot of different people in a lot of different places. But things like values matter. Who am I? Do I like myself? How do I improve? You can go back and listen to episode, I can't even tell you when, but Google, you can search for it in the YouTube or Apple or just online with Randall, and look for Maslow, hierarchy of needs, self-actualization. Self-actualization doesn't mean perfection. Self-actualization, for my context, is the ability to look in the mirror, like who you are, but no, there's ways and manners in which you can improve. And so I would recommend that a value check-in is a good thing. Are you doing things you want to do? Are you doing things you should do? Number 2 is the relationships. While I love to work, I love doing the podcast, I love working with clients, the older I get, the more I realize my legacy is not this company, is not these podcasts, although there's a lot of good lessons maybe someday my kids will actually listen to. My legacy is my children and my wife and our relationships, and now with my mom and my sisters. So what are you doing to solidify that work-life balance, that those priorities that should be hopefully at home in some way, shape, or form? Home's defined a lot of different ways. There is no right or wrong to who that home encompasses. But we all have a home, whether it's a dog, a family, a significant other. What's going on there? And how do I make sure that I'm doing the things I should be there so that I can worry about the things I need to be doing here, office-wise, business-wise, professionally, so I can really focus on that. The third is your own health. Are you getting a chance to take care of yourself with what you eat, walk, exercise? I would even say mental health is critically important. What are the things you can do at home or on the way to work or maybe even at work that allow you to be both mentally and physically healthy? Taking time each day for those is critical. Some come to it more naturally than others, but we all have a way in which we can be better with taking care of ourselves. Fourth, real quickly, is financially. Are you doing things that will allow you to be successful in the short and long term financially? Short term, taking care of yourself, your family, your significant other, whatever responsibilities you have. Long term, in terms of retirement, making sure that you're in a place where you feel really good about where you're going financially. It's a good chance to ask questions. Am I doing the right things? You can always email me at podcast@philanthropy.com. I have a lot of personal conversations because I love retirement conversations, discussions. I read a lot, not to give individual stock advice, but sometimes look, the time value of money is important. Saving early is better than trying to save late. Figure out where you're at. And lastly, at least for me, spiritually, more religiously, are you who you want to be? Are you doing things that you should be? Does what you do every day match whatever spirituality, religious belief system you have? Are you living what you want to be? There's an old saying by Zig Ziglar that I think is important as to why the personal in these 5 areas, the values, the relationships, the health, mental and physical, the financial and the spiritual or religious, are all important, and why they affect what's going on professionally, where I spent most of my time today. He said, you can't truly be considered successful in your business life if your home life is in shambles. Zig Ziglar. I believe that. If you don't take time to make sure your personal not perfect, nobody's is, but isn't well aligned, isn't taken care of, then it will affect your personal or your professional life. It bleeds over. So finding balance to be able to improve and do this, as I call it, the 6-month uplift now, both personally and professionally, will come together, synergy, in creating a better 6 months through December 31st. My hope is today gives you a chance to kind of think about that, maybe take a note or two, contemplate, look at these things I've mentioned. How do I get myself ready so I can kill it the next 6 months, both personally and professionally, so that I have a great Thanksgiving, a great holidays. And I can look in the mirror December 31 and say, that was really good 180 days. Don't forget, check out the blogs at hallettphilanthropy.com, 90-second reads, 2 a week. And if you'd like to reach out to me, as mentioned a few minutes ago, podcast at hallettphilanthropy.com. Philanthropy, nonprofit work, charity, however you want to put it, is going to become more important. I think we're in for some interesting moments to come in the next 6 months to a year, maybe 2. And philanthropy fills the gaps. There are going to be people who ask questions, who are wondering what happened to them. And, oh, geez, it's my reminder of my favorite saying. Some people make things happen. Some people watch things happen. Then there are those who wondered what happened. Philanthropy, what you do, what we do, board member, gift officer, CDO, you're an executive in a nonprofit, volunteer. You are someone who makes things happen for people and things that are wondering what happened. Filling the hole between free enterprise and government. Pretty cool, because that means you're making a difference. And that's what life should be. For you, for others, where can we help make the world a better place? Love of mankind, the definition of philanthropy. That's what we should be aiming for. Thanks again for joining me today, Randall, on this edition of Around with Randall. We'll see you next time, and don't forget, make it a great day.